I hope you weren't thinking too much about China or Russia, because this here is the United States, and we've got a Middle East addiction that we just can't seem to kick. I mean, in the last 48 hours, we've seen 2.5 conflicts restart, one new one begin, because I guess why not, and the biggest one of all looming, with U.S. officials threatening direct military action against Iran. So let's walk through all 5 of these, or 4.5, I think is probably the right way to put it. Starting with the Houthis, the U.S. just carried out round 3 of airstrikes against the Yemen-based Houthis. We actually got a press conference yesterday from the Pentagon that runs through a fair amount of this. This is Air Force Lieutenant General Gerkowicz, which I'm sure I mispronounced. He's the Director of Operations for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, giving kind of an overview of this series of strikes. Let's give that a listen.
The initial wave of strikes hit over 30 targets at multiple locations, degrading a variety of Houthi capabilities. These included terrorist training sites, unmanned aerial vehicle infrastructure, weapons manufacturing capabilities, and weapons storage facilities. It also included a number of command and control centers, including a terrorist compound where we know several senior Houthi unmanned aerial vehicle experts were located. On Sunday, strike operations continued against additional headquarters locations, weapons storage facilities, as well as detection capabilities that have been used to threaten maritime shipping in the past. Today, the operation continues, and it will continue in the coming days until we achieve the president's objectives.
Now, of course, this isn't the first time that the United States has hit the Houthis. In previous instances, we've gone largely after what the general talked about here: drones, missiles, radar sites, some bunkers, but not really any command and control nodes. We don't know right now how many senior leaders or who were eliminated, but the general does talk about why this time is different.
It's a much broader set of targets that we've been able to action in this case. And the other key differences are the delegation of authorities from the president through Secretary Hegseth down to the operational commander. So that allows us to achieve a tempo of operations where we can react to opportunities that we see on the battlefield in order to continue to put pressure on the Houthis.
Okay, so what he's getting at there is the approval authority. The higher it is, the slower it gets to approve an actual strike. And, if somebody's on the battlefield and they're moving around, you want that authority as low as possible so you can actually execute that target before the person moves or the whole situation on the battlefield changes. That's something we actually saw quite a bit during the first Trump administration, is they delegated that authority pretty far down the chain of command, allowing more local commanders to execute those strikes. And it sounds like that's what we're doing with the Houthis right now as well. Now, in terms of the overall casualties, the Houthis yesterday put out an updated casualty count from their side, saying that 53 people were killed and 98 were wounded. And they included in that list 5 women and 2 children that were killed, and 18 children and 1 woman that was wounded. Now, the general does talk to that aspect here as well.
We have some initial estimates. I hesitate to say what they are because they're very much estimates at this point, but I think in terms of dozens might be a safe overall characterization. On the civilian casualty side, no indications of any civilian casualties. We, of course, have seen some of the accusations by the Houthis. We look at those closely when they do come in, but we have no credible indications of any civilian casualties.
And I should mention that with those Houthi claims, we actually haven't seen any photos or videos confirming the number of casualties. They've been pretty quiet other than just putting out numbers. Now, the Houthis have claimed in recent days to have carried out a series of attempted strikes against U.S. ships, notably the USS Harry S. Truman aircraft carrier in the Red Sea, and they said that they were successful. But to be fair, the Houthis always say it's successful so long as they actually launch the munition. We didn't see anything in terms of coming anywhere near the U.S. ships, and the general talks to that as well.
Houthis claim to have tried to attack the Harry S. Truman. Quite frankly, it's hard to tell because while we're executing precision strikes, they missed by over 100 miles. I would just tell you their effectiveness, I would question anything that they claim in the press that they're doing or not doing.
That's something that I feel like we need to be careful with. We can't write off Houthi capabilities entirely. We're going to get back to this in a second with National Security Advisor Michael Waltz talking about the Houthi capabilities when it comes to their missiles and drones. We don't want to write those off like they're nothing. Every one of these launches could result in the death of American sailors. So keep that in mind. However, in this case, they appear to have missed wildly. Now, the last piece here is important for the rest of this video because it's kind of dialing in on Iran, which is going to be a theme through the rest of these conflicts that are, again, picking up in recent days.
The Bashad is not currently being used for those operations, but we do know that other vessels are contemplated for those sorts of operations. We're watching very closely to see if they return to the AO.
So there's actually a lot of rumor last night that the Bashad was sunk. There's no indication that that's true. It seems like it might have actually, like the general said, returned to Iranian territorial waters. But a big portion of this, and we're going to hear this over and over again in today's video and probably going forward, is how much the Iranians are helping the Houthis with their targeting. As in, they have a direct role. This isn't an independent Houthi effort. Now, shifting over to the other conflict that has restarted, the ceasefire is off. in Gaza. Overnight, Israeli forces began striking multiple Hamas targets throughout the Gaza Strip. We got a couple statements here we'll run through. Netanyahu's office said the decision to resume strikes came shortly after midnight, quote, following Hamas's repeated refusal to release our hostages, as well as its rejection of all the proposals it has received from U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, and from the mediators, end quote. White House National Security Council spokesperson Brian Hughes said, quote, Hamas could have released hostages to extend the ceasefire, but instead chose refusal and war, end quote. Now, we are seeing today quite a few accounts of Hamas leadership being confirmed killed in this series of strikes, and the Gaza Ministry of Health is reporting that 404 total people have been killed and 562 wounded. Shifting over to the other side here of this conversation, Al Jazeera's Hamad Salhut reports that, quote, Israel itself had decided to move away from the negotiations for phase 2 of this deal that would ultimately see an end to the war and release all 59 Israeli captives still being held in Gaza. Al Jazeera continued by saying Israel has been trying to avoid moving to the second phase of the ceasefire with backing from the United States, while Hamas has argued that the deal should continue to phase 2 as initially agreed upon. Then we actually have some interesting commentary here from former IDF spokesperson Jonathan Conricus, who anybody following the war will probably recognize him. We've got a couple clips here of him talking about what this looks like and why this round of fighting with Hamas is going to be different. Let's give that a listen.
Colonel, how much different is it now knowing you have a president of the United States that lets you get all your weapons, not holding them back, are not going to tell you not to go into certain areas, and are going to let you call the shots? How much different does it feel?
Well, we'll know in a few days. I think from the beginning, this looks and feels different. And I think that the preparations in Israel are for a very different type of military campaign. Some of that is based on the political understanding that what will Israel be allowed to do by its allies and friends around the world, and most importantly by the US. And I think that the Israeli plans, and Israel has signaled that, is that Israel is going to take the battle to Hamas and make them feel pain like we haven't done before, including using all tools available for the state of Israel against Hamas and everything that supports Hamas. And of course, that wasn't available for Israel in the past, and that prevented Israel from conducting decisive warfare, and that unfortunately extended the fighting. It extended the suffering unduly.
So something that stood out to me there was Conricus talking about how Israel's going to go after everything that is Hamas, their source of power, their source of strength, all of their military infrastructure, but also what supports Hamas. Again, we've got this theme of everything pointing back to Iran, which it does for what it's worth, but it's just notable that in every one of these instances, we are seeing, both the United States and Israel continue to hammer that point, driving that home, which I think is probably why we saw some comments from National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and President Trump just the other day talking about how striking Iran is on the table. Now, turning to the half conflict that is back on, I think is the way I'll put it. 2 days ago on Israel's northern border on March 16th, they put out a statement saying, quote, earlier today, the IDF struck and eliminated 2 Hezbollah terrorists who were surveillance operatives and took part in directing terror attacks in southern Lebanon. So we haven't really seen a discontinuation of hostilities in southern Lebanon. Israeli forces are still there. The fighting there right now is nowhere near like we're seeing with the Houthis or in Gaza now, or even in the rest of Syria. But it is there's a possibility there that the northern front starts to heat up as well. But Hezbollah is not entirely off the hook. Our new conflict that I was getting ready to make a video about yesterday, and then everything else popped off, so we're just going to wrap it into today. Syria. The new Syrian government is engaged in a military campaign in their west along the Lebanese border with possibly Hezbollah, maybe some other militant groups or smugglers or things like that. It's hard to tell at this point. So a couple days ago, what we know is that Syria is accusing Hezbollah of capturing 3 of their soldiers and executing them. In response, the Syrian military deployed forces to their border in the western portion of the country, south of Tartus and Latakia, and they began firing artillery and multiple launch rockets into Lebanese territory that they say is controlled by Hezbollah or Hezbollah-affiliated groups. Hezbollah, for their part, has said that they have nothing to do with this at all, and they're not even going to fire back, kind of suggesting that that's not them engaged in the fighting at all. While this is ongoing, worth remembering that Hezbollah is not the official government of Lebanon. They are a political military organization with significant power, we should say. But while this is happening, the Lebanese military is now deploying troops to that portion of the country to try to stop the fighting. So I wouldn't necessarily call this a war. I think that's a little premature. We've seen, as of the last count, at least, I think, 8 people dead, 8 Syrians that have been killed in this fighting, 8 Syrian military members. I haven't seen a civilian casualty count quite yet, but it's this continued spark. We've seen this fighting before between groups in Lebanon and Syria, and we just have to keep in mind that area is far from quiet right now, and it's at a period of time where the new Syrian government is kind of being tested, if you will, to see if they'll be able to hold up to this. Now, all of this kind of circles back to the big one here in the Middle East, Iran. And we have seen increasing talk lately from the U.S. administration about how striking Iran might actually be in the cards. In fact, just yesterday, March 17th, President Trump put out a post on Truth Social where he said, quote, "Let nobody be fooled. The hundreds of attacks made by Houthi, the sinister mobsters and thugs based in Yemen, who are hated by the Yemeni people, all emanate from and are created by Iran. Any further attack or retaliation by the Houthis will be met with great force, and there is no guarantee that the force will stop there. Iran has played the innocent victim of rogue terrorists when they've lost control, but they haven't lost control. They're dictating every move, giving them the weapons, supplying them with money and highly sophisticated military equipment, and even so-called intelligence." I don't know why it's so-called intelligence. I think they are providing the intelligence. Every shot fired by the Houthis will be looked upon from this point forward as being a shot fired from the weapons and leadership of Iran. And Iran will be held responsible and suffer the consequences, and those consequences will be dire. So this is a very, very formal, official statement from the United States tying together the actions of the Houthis directly to Iran. It's been no secret that Iran is a strong backer of the Houthis and provides a lot of their military equipment, training, and financial resources over the years, and intelligence, as we know. But in this case, it's not just that the groups are linked. It's Trump saying, hey, every shot fired by the Houthis, we will view as a shot fired by the Iranians, which is big because that's happening every day. That means, that Iran is firing at U.S. forces almost every single day now in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, as we expect that to continue. Now, looking back a couple days here on March 16th, we have some statements from National Security Advisor Michael Waltz talking about just this when he's asked the question if all options are on the table when it comes to Iran. Let's give it a listen.
Does that mean direct military action on Iran is possible?
Well, all options are always on the table with the president, but Iran needs to hear him loud and clear. It is completely unacceptable, and it will be stopped. The level of support that they've been providing the Houthis, just like they have Hezbollah, just like they have the militias in Iraq, Hamas, and others.
So earlier when the general was talking about how the Houthis missed all the ships by like hundreds of miles, I said we got to walk this line because they do still have pretty significant capabilities. That's exactly what Waltz gets into here.
The difference here is the Houthis have incredibly sophisticated air defenses, and they also have anti-shipping cruise missiles, drones, sea skimming types of attack drones, and other ballistic missiles even. They've launched dozens of attacks on multiple warships, dozens of attacks, over 175 on global commerce, sank multiple ships. I just think the American people need to understand what has happened here.
And then, of course, as we've seen with a couple statements so far, National Security Advisor Waltz brings it right back to the source of the problem here, Iran.
We will hold not only the Houthis accountable, but we're going to hold Iran, their backers, accountable as well. And if that means they're targeting ships that they have put in to help, their Iranian trainers, IRGC and others, that intelligence, other things that they have put in to help the Houthis attack the global economy, those targets will be on the table too.
I mean, look, he's right. We've talked about that quite a bit before. All of these groups are part of the overall self-proclaimed axis of resistance, but the center of that, the core of that, is Iran. So if we keep dealing with the militias in Iraq and Syria, if Israel keeps dealing with Hamas and Hezbollah, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and other groups in Gaza and the West Bank, and the U.S. is going after the Houthis down in Yemen, those are all just small outgrowths, if you will, of the overall Iranian proxy network. So if you want to bring this thing to a close once and for all, something has to be done with Iran. And it looks like from everything we're seeing here, that does seem to be a focus right now of the current administration. Of course, this is going to take a lot of focus from the United States, no doubt. So, any pivot to China or major focus on Russia might be on the back burner for the time being. But that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.